In Playing with Your Mind, we looked at how authors are the quintessential mind gamers, playing with their readers' thoughts and emotions. This week, we're going to examine this further to see if the opposite is true. I want you to consider the author sitting down to write. And I want you to know that this author comes with his, her, their own personal scaffolding or framework in which they operate both off-page and on. This scaffolding, often practical and grounding, most likely consists of the tenets that govern the author's daily life: ethics, morals, values, reputation, family life, stability, marriage, partnership, work, and probably a whole host of other things. When the story begins to formulate and summon the author to act as its channeler, its voice, if the author rises to the call of the story, he, she, they must write within their life scaffolding. That's obvious, a reality, but it's also a great challenge. And it's a great challenge because the story, with its wily storybook nature, often wills the author to pen events, experiences, and emotions at odds with the tenets of the scaffolding on which the author relies for stability and cerebral health. When the story appears, it will throw forbidden love, fury, conflict, violence, infidelity, betrayal, and vengeance at the author, expecting that author to manifest them on the page with no regard for the off-page life and the people who are in it. Let's say two people show up for the author. They are happy, they're in love. And let's say these two people are beyond happy. They're passionately and euphorically in love. There are fireworks between them, and there's no pulling them asunder. In this case, the author penning their experience is probably safe enough within that personal grounding framework. But then, let's say that suddenly the husband of the female lover shows up, and it's discovered that this wonderful love story developing is actually a story of betrayal and forbidden love. Now the author is going to have to pivot to accommodate that, quite likely having to bend their own moral scaffolding to mentally explore that turn of events. And let's say that once the author has recalibrated to that plot twist, the other lover's wife storms into the mix. Now the author has not only a furious husband scorned on their hands, but also an enraged wife. When channeling the events, the author will find themselves in many unexpected predicaments. In this scenario, for example, with the betrayed wife convincing the husband scorned that murder would be a fitting punishment for this crime of the heart. So now, the author will not only be exploring infidelity, but they will also be cerebrally dabbling in murder and revenge. These crises on which stories rely will put pressure on the author's brain as that author begins to pen experiences shunned off-page. The author will be channeling things that put the tenets of their personal scaffolding to the test. And why is this difficult? Well, it's difficult because the channeled scenarios demand the investment of the author's heart. If you'll recall the dynamic duo, one of the pre-launch videos, one of this exploration's mantras was and is that authors must believe and feel what they are writing to make it real for their readers. And how do they do that effectively? Well, if you remember the two later videos, Into the Zone and Honoring the Zone, I suggested that the author had to stimulate their own six senses to disconnect from domestic reality and enter the storybook realm, to open themselves up to feeling the events and emotions of the story. The author must feel deeply and powerfully enough to transmit those emotions to the reader. The question is, if authors stimulate their own senses to feel what their characters feel, so they can garner enough emotional energy to stimulate their readers' emotions, are they not playing mind games with themselves first, before they consider doing it with their readers? Mind gamers aren't known for playing mind games on themselves. They tend to stay in their own protective bubble, figuratively whipping others into submission. Granting the story and its crises into one's heart is a vulnerable opening up of oneself to circumstance, experience, and emotion. It's a far cry from the selfish, manipulative behavior of an off-page mind gamer. On page, in story, the author must allow intense emotion, lust, love, rapture, desire, hatred, rage, jealousy, and malice to pull their heartstrings. This can be excruciating, especially when the author knows they're free falling away from the off-page scaffolding that shelters them. When the characters come to the author, needing the author's emotion, the author has no choice but to comply. And in this process of bleeding emotions so raw and personal into the characters, the author can feel like they are disappearing and the off-page scaffolding is fading away. The story is the real world, the author like a shadow or a ghost behind it. This phenomenon begs the question, when the story is in control, from whence does the story come? If it is coming to the author, from what realm? Is it coming from life experiences, dreams, distant memories, ancestral memories via DNA, energies and particles out there somewhere, the subconscious? Or is it coming from what many call the noosphere? The noosphere is something we'll be exploring down the road. Authors are compelled to write stories. They are loyal to inspiration. They experience a calling to write. Within this context, does the author manipulate the reader's mind to win the reader's heart? Most definitely. And authors must manipulate their own minds first. They must feel the emotions deeply. They must push through the ethical and moral scaffolding of their own lives to be true to those emotions. The story often compels them to do so, and they experience a calling to honor the story's demands. Readers, by entering the story, are conceding to the experience of being taken for a psychological spin. Authors will do whatever it takes to create an impression, to influence and move their readers. Taking this into consideration, are authors the quintessential mind gamers? Perhaps we should say, with affection and reverence, that authors are quintessential strategists, with great emotional scope and adventurous hearts willing to risk intense feelings for the end goal of engaging the reader. A reader who, by opening a book, is asking to be taken on a psychological ride.